today we're on a bit of a side quest and we're going to be exploring some uncharted territory, delving into hacking and exploits in music production software.
What the hell is this? Time's a wasting, big guy. Jesus.
For the past week or so, I've been adventuring deep into the digital realm and have discovered some pretty wild hacks involving this tracker software called Renoise. So this all started when I discovered my first Renoise hack, and it's actually such a simple one, and all we've got to do is have this follow playback position button turned on, and then we can just mess with this slider whilst we're in Renoise, and it's going to follow the playback position but then jump between patterns, and we can create all these cool glitch effects as our tune's playing. And the only other thing we've got to do is have a audio recorder going in the background and just hit record on that and record all the cool stuff we're going to do. Once you've got that recording, you can obviously edit it further and then finally just chuck it back in your project and then have that as a whole new section. So I found all this really interesting, and it led me down a really deep rabbit hole. For the whole of the last week, I've been thinking about all these other features and aspects of Renoise that I could exploit. And all of that really led me to my second and slightly more advanced Renoise hack, which was actually based on a feature of a much older computer from the 1990s. So I first noticed this functionality on my EMU 5000 Ultra, which is a hardware sampler from the 90s. And what I have here is quite a basic preset I've set up with 3 different layers all stacked on top of each other, spread up and down the keyboard. And what we actually have in the global settings here is the option to transpose this preset, and this works just as you would think, where if I play this preset now, I can transpose all of those layers up by the same rate, and I think that was the original intention for this transpose option. But what's really interesting here is actually if I go to another preset I've set up where I have a drum bank and I look at the voices where I've got each drum hit is on a different note up and down the keyboard. If I come into Renoise now and I just play this drum break, this global transpose option, now when I turn this up and down, it's actually going to offset where the slices are, and so it doesn't pitch everything up and down, it actually changes the drum hits or the pattern. Which is cool. You can use it to create fills, and I've just got the same pattern looping, but I can add variations just by turning this transpose button. So I thought that was a really interesting functionality, and I thought, how could I bring that into Renoise and maybe take it a step further? So in order to set this up in Renoise, I had to do a few things, and the first was I just programmed a very basic drum loop, which I'll just play for you now. So that just goes round and round that same looping pattern. But what I've done, if I dive into this instrument, is in the phrase editor, I've basically created a whole bunch of phrases, and you can see this one is starting at C4, and then this one goes to C sharp 4, and this one goes to D. And so basically I've transposed the phrases up one by one to emulate the same thing that's happening in the EMU, and it works perfectly. Now, whilst I was in here doing all this work, I thought I might as well set up a few extra things. So if I dive a little bit deeper, I've also got these time stretch effects, and that's essentially where you repeat the note at a very quick interval. So I've got 128 repeats of the note, and then what I'm doing is cycling through the start position of the note really slowly to create this juttery stretching effect. And that actually is quite a close emulation of the time stretching we have on the old Akai's. And then the last trick I threw in here was actually this phasing effect. And so this is another old kind of jungle trick where you have 2 of the same sample playing together, but one is slightly delayed, and that phases the samples against each other. And so I've got this phasing trick, and then you see I've delayed this second note by 9 hexadecimal amount in Renoise here, and then if I keep going through, I've gone that one more to 0A, so all the way up to sort of 40. I've got these delay values increasing over time, so I can change the phase amount over time. So lots of slightly nerdy stuff going on there. And if I jump back into this other window, what I've then done is I have got this instrument MIDI control, and I've set it up to send program messages back to Renoise. And what you can do is you can change the phrase number by sending program messages to this instrument. And so I've mapped this up so you can see the program changes here. And when I change the program messages, what it's going to do is change the actual selected phrase in this window. What I've basically done is set up one program that's just going to do the drum offsets. I've got one that's going to do the stretching and one that's going to do the phasing technique. And the last thing I've really done here is got a button that resets it back to the first phrase, which is locked to C. So the first phrase is going to play the drums as they're sequenced, and then all these other things are going to affect them in different ways. And I can basically mess with all these macros and have a really simple looping drum break and just change it, create drum fills, do effects, all this fun stuff. So I'll just show you now with just the drum break soloed.
In the digital symphony of Renoise, hacking becomes a delicate exploration. Ethical responsibility guides this dance, preserving the rhythm between innovation and artistic expression. Doesn't merely operate within its digital confines, but becomes a virtuoso, unlocking secrets to weave musical tapestries that transcend the conventional boundaries of the software.
My third and final Renoise hack is completely bonkers and takes advantage of a few interesting features inside the program. Now the first one is that in this instruments tab here, you can scroll between instruments with your mouse wheel, and actually when you have it selected you can just press the up and down arrows to jump between different instruments and select different ones. Now another interesting feature is whatever instrument I have selected in this instruments tab will run through the track I have selected and all the effects associated to that track. And this means I can jump through instruments really quickly and have them all run through the same effects. So I thought that was really cool. And then I just started messing around. Actually, I started with my MIDI keyboard here. And I put it in art mode and just created a basic root fifth octave pattern. And I was playing with the rate. So this is pretty interesting how it's all working. I can obviously use my mouse wheel and my up and down arrows to flip between these instruments. So I have a few things going on there, and the first thing I did was actually take the sequencing a step further. And whilst this is an amazing keyboard, the Digitone actually is a bit more of a powerful sequencer. And so I set up a sequence in the Digitone, and the one amazing thing in here is that I also have this probability percentage, so I'm going to make it so not every note is going to play, and I just created a slightly more interesting sequence. So as I was playing with all this and scrolling around with my arrow keys, the one thing I was finding is it was all a bit random. Like I could create cool sounds, but it was all just a bit of a mess. And so I wanted to be able to control the way it's actually moving, either the scrolling with the mouse wheel or the up and down arrows in this instruments tab. How could I control that? And what I did for this is I got this program called Midi Bome Translator, and what I've essentially done is made it so the physical press on your computer keyboard of the up and down keys, I've been able to map them to MIDI. And what this then means is when I press go in this Midi Bome program and in the digitone, I'm sending on MIDI channel 1 and I'm sending value 40, which I set up in Midi Bome. I can start to turn up the depth and actually start to scroll. You can now see through this up and down this instruments tab in kind of an organized way with an LFO in a much more controllable way. So once I understood all the functionality of how I was going to sequence everything and also how I was doing that clever trick to move it up and down in the instruments tab, I then set about organizing all these samples and tuning them and level balancing them and picking them and actually ordering them in a certain sequence so they would work together. So there was a huge amount of work went into this project. And then the last thing was actually to set up this huge list of macros along the bottom here. So all the effects everything's going through, I map them all to macros and then I map them all to my MIDI controller. And if I just take you through these things one by one now, I think that would be the best way to make sense of everything that's going on in this project. So this first control is the volume slider, and the second one is the release of all the instruments. So I can make it really snappy or let the instruments ring out. And then have this like sparkly crystallizer shimmery thing. Have a phaser. And then a tremolo. And like a filter wob, which are cool together. We've got a delay. And then the last one is a big reverb. And then I've also got this crossfader, which is like a low pass filter as I go down. So I've essentially set up a really expressive instrument, and then as I turn up this depth on the LFO, I can start to cycle through instruments, and I was just messing with that, just playing live really with this really cool kind of setup I've made and trying to come up with a cool song. So that's basically the whole project. These are my Renoise hacks, and I hope you've enjoyed this one. I've gone super deep here and really just like try to exploit this program in all the ways I can, and had a blast actually. So thank you for staying tuned to the end, and I will catch you very soon in the next one. Peace.
In the intricate world of music creation, the electron digitone becomes an unconventional key, unlocking new dimensions within Renoise's digital landscape and transforming the art of music production into a captivating symbiosis, offering musicians boundless possibilities for creative exploration and expression.